she was ready for me, and I wasn't ready, and so our musicians are wonderful. They really are, and they got to deal with a lot. With Pastor Perry and I, they got to deal with a lot. So I also forgot something this morning when I really wanted to go over it, but I'll go over it now, and then I'll probably go over it again next week in the morning, and that is our new times that are coming up. Just so everyone's aware, beginning at the first service of January, we will follow these time slots. Our morning service will begin at 9, go to 10:15. Sunday school for the kids will begin pretty much right away or at 10:15. Coffee fellowship, we will be bringing it back like a true coffee fellowship over in the Timothy Center like we used to do. And we'll have a great time standing around and talking and catching up. And then at 10:30, we'll have adult Bible fellowship or adult Sunday school. But we won't always have that. So we're going to make it a kind of a flex time. We've got some classes scheduled, but there'll be times where maybe there's a class, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but you don't want to go to, or doesn't maybe pertain to you, and that's okay. Then you can just enjoy extra fellowship. So maybe, let's say we have a parenting class, which is probably the second class we'll have, and you say, well, unless God miraculously gives me a child like Elizabeth, I will not be needing that class at the time, unless you want to help your kids become better parents or something like that. So there'll be times where we'll just have a 45-minute time of fellowship, and I think that will be very good for our church. Very good just to get to know each other a little bit more, to dive deeper into how is the weather, how is your job, things like that. So I'm looking forward to that, and then the evening service will be at 5 like it has been. So that's going on. I'll review that again next week, Sunday morning, to conclude like I was supposed to this morning. So. All right, with that, let's recite our verse for November and December, Galatians 6, 9, and 10. And if you would, say the reference with me, and we'll go through the whole verse, both verses. Galatians 6, 9, and 10. And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith. All right. May the Lord just help us hide those words in our hearts. Let's pray, and we'll begin the service. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness, for the chance to gather again tonight to give you praise. We thank you for this morning and just the great talent, especially of our teens who are serving today, but also just the music that focused upon our hearts and our faith. And I pray that you would help our faith to increase, to grow, and that the things that we say and do tonight and the attention that we give to you and your word would be honoring to you and encouraging and challenge to our hearts as well. So we just thank you for this time together. May this singing please you, Lord. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen.
Well, we have really good musicians here. I'm really thankful for our AV booth, especially when I don't have a platform to put a book on. So they were on it with the slides this morning, and I appreciate that. I know all of you have really come to appreciate the slides as well. Stand with me, if you would, as we continue singing our Christmas songs together. It came upon the midnight clear. It came upon the midnight clear, that glorious song of old, from angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men, from heaven's all gracious King. The world in solemn stillness lay to hear the angels sing, and ye beneath life's crushing load, whose forms are bending low, who toil along the climbing way with painful steps and slow. Look now, for glad and golden hours come swiftly on the wing. Oh, rest beside the weary road and hear the angels sing. For lo, the days are hastening on by promise
circling years shall come the time foretold, when the new heaven and earth shall own the Prince of Peace, their King, and the whole world send back the song which now the angels sing.
We'll continue standing as we sing, "O Little Town of Bethlehem." If you're using your books, just the first and third verses together. You may be seated. I love the call there. Oh, come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord. You know, the ensemble this morning sang that song, and the phrase there was, how greater still our song will be when we see the Lord again. And I trust you've come even tonight to continue praising the Lord in song. Stand with me one more time as we sing 227, Who is He?
Who is he in yonder stall, at whose feet the shepherds fall? Who is he in deep distress, fasting in the wilderness? 'Tis the Lord, a wondrous glory, 'tis the Lord, the King of glory. At his feet we humbly fall, crown him, Lord of all. Who is he the people bless for his words of gentleness? Who is he to whom they bring all the sick and sorrowing? 'Tis the Lord, a wondrous glory, 'tis the Lord, the King of glory. At his feet we humbly fall, crown him, Lord of all. Who is he that stands and weeps at the grave where Lazarus sleeps? Who is he, the gathering throng, great with loud triumphant song? 'Tis the Lord, a wondrous glory, 'tis the Lord, the King of glory. At his feet we humbly fall, crown him, Lord of all. Lo, at midnight from the grave, comes to heal and help and save. Who is he that from his throne rules through all the world alone? 'Tis the Lord who wondrous glory, 'tis the Lord, the King of glory. At his feet we humbly fall, crown him, Lord of all.
You may be seated.
Good evening. I'll apologize if I'm moving a little more slowly tonight. So during COVID, my boys and I, if you ever heard of P90X, it's like this intense kind of workout thing. So during COVID, when we had the time, we did it, and I thought, okay, that's my once in a lifetime. Don't have to do that anymore. And Landon texted me this week, hey, you're going to do P90 with me. I was like, well, I'm over 50 and you're not even here. Why do I have to do it? And I think it's like a misery loves company thing. So I started this week. So basically, I screamed like a girl when I got in and out of my car because my quads hurt so bad. And if I can't point my hand up as far, and I told my wife today, I don't know if I'm getting sick because my adenoids feel a little swollen or if it's just my neck is sore from doing shoulder yesterday. So for the next 3 months, don't talk to me because I'm not going to be in a good mood. So. But we'll get through it. So we're going to continue our discussion today on the kingdom. And so to get us up to speed as we usually would. So we're moving right along. After today, we'll have just a couple weeks left. So we started the first day with an introduction. And the big takeaway was the kingdom is now. And so we even had this discussion in our elder meeting this week. Pastor brought up a couple examples where Christ is giving scripture either to people in Nazareth or in the temple. And he uses the phrase that today this is come to pass, right? So the kingdom has come. I'm here. I've started the kingdom. It is now. Then what we talked about week 2 was the fact that we often as Christians, we tend to look at salvation as something that we get saved and that's pretty much it and we just have to endure for the next however many years and then Christ finally comes back and everything's as it should be. When really salvation should have a much deeper effect than just getting us ready for heaven. It should have an impact on how we live our lives today. And so that's really the focus of the Sermon on the Mount. And so really the 2 weeks after that, we talked about the Beatitudes. And we really got to the point where we said, hey, these are really reflections of the attitudes with which people need to come into the kingdom. So if you want to be part of the kingdom, what type of attitude do you need to have? And that is that we have to recognize that we are completely incapable on our own of coming into the kingdom, and we need Christ in order to bring us in. And so we kind of crossed those out. And so now today, last week we started into the kingdom heart, and that's where we're going to finish up today. So we're really in kind of what you think about as the core or the central part of the Sermon on the Mount. And again, to get us a little bit of perspective here. So this first area, which is really the Beatitudes, is the identity or kingdom identity. So again, what attitudes, how should we identify if we are going to be part of the kingdom? Then this middle part, which is where we were last week, where we'll be today, and in fact where we'll be next week as well, is this idea of kingdom living. So if we come into the kingdom, what is the expectation with which we should live? And it's completely different, right? And so we really, last week, I gave an introduction, and then we got into the first of 6 case studies, right? And so last week it was, Christ says, you have heard it said, you shall not murder. But then he goes on to say, well, I'm telling you, not only shouldn't you murder, you shouldn't be angry with someone, you shouldn't have contempt for someone. And so really what we got to was the fact that up until that time, everybody, and even today, we tend to focus on the external. So if we look at someone and say, oh, they're living like a Christian, they must be a Christian. That's not the check, right? We talked about, I'm doing this check mark, I'm doing this check mark. Where Christ says it's not about the external, it's all about the internal. It's not just about the actions that we take, it's also about the attitudes with which we take those actions. And we're going to finish up those case studies today, and then next week we'll get into additional practices in the kingdom, and then we'll finish out with the final week talking about kingdom choice. And that's actually, it's come up a little bit in the earlier part of the series, and it'll even come up today. We'll look at chapter 7, and we'll kind of get to an example where we see the outcome of kingdom living. What does it mean? What is the choice that we have to make? And again, given that we're really focusing on the internal, I've labeled this section the kingdom heart. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. And so again, here is, just as a reminder, this is the table that I gave to you last time. And so you'll see there are 6 boxes or 6 rows here. We filled in the first one. So you can kind of think about last week as like the introduction in a 2-part series. And just like most of Pastor's messages, I think most of the time I speak as well, is it takes about two-thirds of your time to set the stage, do the introduction, and then you really go through pretty quickly thereafter. And that's kind of the point here, right? And you notice that Christ started with anger. And what we're going to see as we go through the rest of these case studies is that I really believe anger was chosen first for a reason, because if you're not angry, then a lot of these other things tend to go away as well. And also, he spent a lot of depth and time in this issue of anger. And so again, as we go through it, we'll go through a little bit more quickly than we did the first time around. So if you want to take your Bible, go to Matthew chapter 5. So again, we're looking at the Sermon on the Mount. And we're talking about... again, these case studies. And again, pretty much all of them are, in fact, let's go ahead and look at verse 21. So Matthew 5:21. You have heard it said by them of old time, you shall not kill, and whoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother, and so on, right? And so again, it's these contrasts, and in all of these contrasts, notice that basically what Christ's saying is, you have heard it said that if you don't do this, then you're good. But I'm telling you, it's not just if you do or don't do those things, it's what it is on the inside that leads you to actually do those things or not do those things that's important. And so that's kind of the focus. So the next one we're going to get to, I've labeled destructive desires. And so I think it's logical that Christ pretty quickly turns to sex right after anger. Sex and violence pretty much go together. A lot of times are 2 of the greatest problem areas we would see in our society. And again, he gets right to the point. So look at verse 27. Again, you see this similar starting point. You have heard it said of them of old time, you shall not commit adultery. Again, seems like it'd be a pretty easy thing, right? We don't do that, and we're good. But I say unto you that whosoever looks on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. And so it gets really to a more deeper internal issue that Christ turned to in this regard. Now, this is nothing new, right? Particularly men have struggled with this for centuries, since inception. You look even in Job, the oldest book in the Bible. It says in Job 31 that Job made a covenant with his eyes that he would not look on a maid. And so this is something that is a continual struggle. But again, what Christ gets to is it's not just the act of adultery, it's the lust that goes to that point. And again, just like with anger being the first step towards murder, lust is the first step towards adultery. So he's basically going kind of backwards in the process. And again, the action is just a symptom. He's trying to get to the root problem that men and women struggle with. So this, again, like anger, the sensual desire is not wrong in and of itself, right? I mean, we're made with that in mind. It's how we procreate, right? So it's just a natural process, but it's what happens after that first step, right? You kind of heard the analogy, which dog do you feed, right? That's the dog that's going to win the fight, the good dog or the bad dog. And so it's feeding the desire. Kind of what I came across, a couple good quotes here is, the difficulty, the issue with lust is that you're looking at a person not for who they are, but simply for how they can satisfy you. And the way I started thinking about it a lot this week was, it really is treating a person as an object rather than a true person for whom Christ died. And so it's really getting to again, with all of these, we tend to look at these examples and we focus on, okay, we do or don't do this, and then, okay, maybe we go backwards in the process and we don't have anger or we don't have lust. But it's a much broader issue about the true inner goodness, and that's going to be the concluding point that we see today. Now, if you continue in the chapter here, so if you then go to verse 29, right? If thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for one of the members should perish, not that the whole body should be cast into hell. If your right hand offend thee, cut it off. And so we kind of, I alluded to this earlier in the series, but it seems odd that you would go to this. And really, I think the idea here is Christ is saying, hey, if you don't want to commit adultery or you don't want to look on a woman to lust after her, then just pluck your eyes out. And we can do everything we need to do, right? We can get it all done. We can check the box that way. This is what we would call basically what in the Latin here, reductio ab absurdum, which basically means it's an argument from absurdity. So he's basically giving such an absurd statement to prove the point that it doesn't really matter if you did those things, because even if you plucked your eyes out and you therefore could not lust on a woman with your eyes, internally you could still sin and have lustful desires. So it's basically saying, hey, it doesn't really, it's not the physical element that matters, it's what's inside that's driving that physical element. And then we kind of look ahead to Matthew chapter 7, again, kind of getting into the choice here, the kingdom choice, right? Once we know these things, we have to make a choice. And if you look at Matthew chapter 7, Mark 7:21, I have it written here, you don't need to turn there. Mark 7:21 says, for from within, out of the heart of men proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, and it goes on to give all these other things. All these evil things come from within and defile the man. And so even in the other Gospels, we see that Christ is always getting to the heart of the matter or the heart of the person, not just what is happening on the outside. So again, filling in our little table here. So number one, no murder. Hey, that's the old. And then remember this word from last week is the Greek word for righteousness, right? And so the old righteousness was simply an action. The new righteousness, what Christ says is true righteousness, is on the inside, true inner goodness. And so it's not just that we're not murdering, it's that we're not having anger or contempt. It's not that we're just not simply having adultery, it's just that we're not it's more so that we're not cultivating lust. And so a good summary quote that I came across for this area, is the kingdom heart is evidenced by a positive love for God and those around us. Therefore, crowding out thoughts, again, right? If we're going to take something away, it has to be replaced by something. So if we want to take lust away, it's going to be replaced, hopefully, or crowded out with thoughts of goodness. From those goodness come deeds of respect and purity that characterize a sexuality as it was meant to be by God. And again, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, right? Because we got 5 of them in total we need to go through. Okay, so next, we have beyond divorce. So look at verse 31. So this is a very short section. It has been said, whoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. So, during this time period, men had all the power. They wanted to divorce a woman, they would simply write a bill of divorcement. Blair says, Emily, you're divorced. Gives her a piece of paper, and that's it, right? It's done. His choice. She has no say in the matter. And during this time period, it was kind of, I found this really fascinating, is that a lot of times the men actually thought they were doing a good thing. I mean, it's their choice. It was really a very selfish thing that they were doing. I'll give them a writ of divorcement, and we will no longer be married, so therefore she will be able to marry someone else. It won't be against the law. And I actually came across this and said, all else, if all else fails, she can turn to prostitution, and that will be fine. Oh, yeah, great guys, huh? I mean, really nice. But that was the mentality, and it got even worse because and pastors mentioned this before, there's 2 schools of thought, right? So you have the school of Hillel, which is think about it as the liberal branch of Judaism. And if your wife wasn't a good cook, if you saw someone you liked better, you could give your current spouse a writing of divorcement, and that would be it. And they were gone. The more conservative branch went more along with biblical teachings and said, hey, you can divorce, but only for reason of adultery, and it would be for that purpose. And I also found it interesting, if you look in the passages following where Christ talks a lot about these things, later on in Matthew, particularly in chapter 19, the disciples respond, or the followers that are there respond, well, should we then even get married? And to me, that's like what we just talked about. Well, shouldn't I just poke my eyes out because then I can't do this? And Christ, we see Paul respond later in 1 Corinthians and say, hey, it's only given for certain people to that, and men and women should come together, and there's a purpose in that union. So, again, there's a purpose here. And as we go through this, right, we can understand the verses from Matthew chapter 19, where it talks about a man shall leave father and mother and shall cleave to his wife. We know the verses about what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. So I think we understand the whole purpose here, right, behind the divorce. But what really, I think this, more than anything else, I think it goes way beyond this idea of divorce, is this idea of the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. And so what the Jewish men were doing is they're saying, hey, I can do, according to the law, I can do this, and it's okay. So as long as it's okay, I have the freedom and right to do that. Whether it's ethically sound or not, because it's according to the law, I'm good. And so I think what Christ is getting at here is, it's not just what the law says, again, you should or shouldn't do, but the attitude with which you come to those things. I knew a guy, and his wife had an affair, and I'll be honest, looking at this from the outside, if that was me, and I'm pretty sure that would never happen, if that was me, I don't know that I could forgive. But this man, in such grace and compassion, forgave his wife and restored that relationship and are together today. That is living by the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. And we see that throughout these examples, that a lot of it is this underlying issue of reconciliation, both as believers with each other and as reconciling people who are unsaved to Christ himself. And through our kingdom living, that's how we bring others to Christ. And so these are how we should live. Again, think about, hey, we used this analogy before, that unbelievers should be shocked by the goodness with which we live. And if we put our spouse away because of adultery or because of some issue, we're doing exactly what is expected. But when we live kingdom style and we reconcile and we exhibit Christ in those situations, that shocks the world and is an example to bring people to him. That's the purpose here. So, again, we're going through our little table here. So we add, if kind of the old righteousness is, okay, if you're going to divorce, simply give your wife the pink slip, okay? You're gone. But what Christ is saying is, it's not even is it no divorce, is that that shouldn't even be the custom. You should live by the spirit of the law. You should do those things that are kingdom style. And notice the order here. If we can control our anger and we can control our lust, then do you think there would be fewer divorces? Yes. Okay. And so I really got a lot out of the order of these things, and you'll see this as we build on this, is that it's kind of like, if we can do this, then the next thing tends to follow suit, and if we can do that, then the next thing tends to follow suit, and if we can do that, then it tends to get easier and easier as we go through this process. Okay. Next, transparent words. So look in verse 33. Again, you have heard it said by them of old time, you shall not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. Okay, so what are we talking about here? You ever, even if you haven't watched it, how many of you have heard of the show Survivor? It's been on for like 20 years, so I suspect you've heard about it. So in the show, right, they drop these people on an island, and the goal is they kick people off as they go, and the goal is, you make kind of alliances, and your goal is to try to basically convince people to keep you there and to convince people to come to your side. And so what if I say, hey, Jack, you have to believe me. I swear on my mother's grave. Or, Mr. Trometer, yeah, this is true. I swear 100 times. Or on my birth of my child, I swear to you, right? So it's basically saying things that are designed to convince other people to believe you. And in biblical days, let me read you, this is Hebrews 6, verse 16. For men verily swear by the greater, and an oath for confirmation is to them an end of all strife. And so in Bible days, it's like, hey, if I tell you this and I swear by Zeus, or if I tell you this in our circumstances, I swear by God himself, that's like the end. You should believe me because I'm saying that. It's kind of like one of my favorite movies is The Sandlot. Okay, how many of you have seen The Sandlot? It's old. It's about baseball. These little kids, and in the Sandlot, the Sandlot team is there, and the team with all the nice uniforms that everyone dislikes comes, and they start. The fat catcher guy starts arguing with the other guy, and you bob for apples in the toilet, and you do this, and you do this, and right? It's going back and forth. And then it gets to the point, does anyone know what the last thing is that they say? You play ball like a girl. And that's like the end-all, be-all. That ends the entire conversation because that's the final thing. That's what I know that's in a stretch, but that's what we're talking about here. That, I say this, and I've gotten to the end, and I have convinced you, and you cannot say anything else that would counter that. So this idea here is that you should, and what does Christ go on to say? In verse 34, he says, but I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is the footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king, neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black, but let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these comes of evil. And it's, so he basically says, hey, our lives should be our promise. If we say we're going to do something, we should do it. If we say we're not going to do something, we don't do it. We don't have to swear. We don't have to put our hand on the Bible. We don't have to swear by our mother. We don't have to swear by our, right? We don't have to do any of these things. Our conversation, our testimony should be good enough, okay? Now, what's the point here? Well, I also found this interesting. We read verse 34 here and through verse 37. This same example is given in James. In fact, the next time Pastor picks up his series in James, it will be the first verse he starts with, because we finished in James 5:11. The next verse is James 5:12, which seems like we actually talked about this in our group this morning, seems like a verse that's completely out of context, because it goes to this whole part about patience, and it gets to this verse. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, nor by earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, lest ye fall into condemnation. So again, James, like I said, pastors mentioned this, it just kind of reiterates a lot of the content from the Sermon on the Mount. We see this exact issue come up again. So what's the whole point? I mean, we don't really do this a whole lot today, but in this context, using this approach, you were effectively trying to verbally manipulate the other person into believing what you said or to coming to your side of the argument. So it's not so much that we need to be truthful and straightforward, which we should be, or that we shouldn't swear, which we shouldn't. The idea is that our conversation, we should not be trying to artificially convince people using something other than truth, or something other than the actions that we would otherwise be taking as a Christian. So again, Christ uses these very specific examples, which during this time period would be really, practical types of things. We don't necessarily struggle too much with some of these things today. Some, yes, still. But it always is a broader context. In this case, it's just simply saying, hey, we are not going to verbally manipulate or try to convince people using undue influence. So if we fill in our little table here, so if you want someone to believe something, You could say you have a vow, you could say you have an oath, and in that day that was fine as long as you can upheld your oath or your vow. But what Christ is saying, hey, is you don't even need to do that. You should not verbally manipulate, and your yes should be yes and your no should be no. Okay, responding to personal injury. So verse 38. You have heard that it has been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So this is the law of retaliation. And, the biggest context here is like one of personal injury. So if you were personally injured, you would have the right to bring that person to the courts, and the courts would punish them, giving them the same punishment that you endured. And it was an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth concept. But what does Christ say? But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. If any man will sue thee at the law and take away thy coat or outer garment, let him have thy cloak, inner garment also. Or vice versa, I can't remember. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him too. Give to him that asks thee, and from him that would borrow of you, turn not away. So what does Christ say? He basically gives 4 examples here. Number 1, he says, you should, the broader context of all of these is that if you are wronged, you should be willing to forgive. And that's difficult to do, right? We talked about my wife, the guy ran into her. It's difficult to forgive him, but you have to do that, right? You can't live with bitterness. You can't live with resentment. And what Christ says here is you have to go not just forgive them, but you have to go beyond what would be expected. You have to, I don't know why. I thought all this week I was thinking when Turn the Other Cheek, I just thought about the song from Frozen. I've seen the movie once. I probably didn't watch the whole thing. But the movie Frozen, is that where it's from? Let It Go, Let It Go? Yeah, so all I did was think about Amy dressing up for Halloween, for trunk or treat all week. And that's the idea, is we have to let things go. And there's a line from a movie that says, do you think it really matters? And that's the mentality that we have to have, right? In the grand context of things, the stuff that we get hung up about, does it really matter for eternity? And the answer is most of the time it doesn't. Give them your shirt. This is mostly talking about a legal case, and Christ dealt with this earlier on in the Sermon on the Mount, is that we have to try to reconcile even before it comes to court. But if it doesn't, you have to be willing to go beyond what would be expected. Go farther than would be required. Give without expectation. Kind of how I concluded here is you need to allow yourself to be injured for Christ's sake. That's the real kind of takeaway here. But really Christ could simply take these things and could rewrite the law and say, okay, yes, the law said eye for eye, tooth to tooth, but now I say, according to the law, you have to turn the other cheek. And according to the law, if someone takes your outer garment, you also have to give them your inner garment. And we could do that according to the law, and just like we did before, make it a checkbox. Okay, I've done this, Lord. But would we do it with a gracious attitude, or would we likely do those things grudgingly? Likely grudgingly. And what he's getting here is it's not a check mark. It's not that we have to do these specific things. It is the underlying internal attitude with which we approach these situations that matters. As I was thinking about this, I got to thinking about, I had to look it up. This is Proverbs 25:21. If your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. And if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. For in doing so, you shall heap coals of fire upon his head, which is like a good thing, which is like something he wouldn't expect. And you have shown him grace when is otherwise either not required, nor is it even expected. And in doing so, again, you shock the world into seeing Christ in his kingdom. So if you look through this, again, this order, notice what happens, right? So Number one, we're not angry. We're not lustful. We don't divorce. We don't verbally manipulate. And think about this. If we had our anger under control, how would we respond if we were personally injured, right? What's our first response when we're injured personally? It is generally anger. And if we can control that, then the secondary response becomes much more Christ-like, much more what we would think of as kingdom-like. Okay, the last one here, moving right along, is how do we respond to our enemies? So we go to verse 43. You have heard that it has been said, you shall love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy, which makes sense, right? But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven, for he makes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love them who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? And if you salute your brethren only, what do more than others? Do not even the publicans do so? So it gets this hate versus love. And this, to me, is kind of like the conclusion, right? It's the wrap-up. If we're going to control our anger, if we're going to turn the other cheek, if we're going to do those things, it is going to result in love. Here's the thing. Look at verse 48. This is the conclusion he makes from this entire section. This is a challenge, right? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father who is in heaven is perfect. Well, we know we can't. Only God is perfect and complete. So what is the underlying purpose here? Well, this word perfect, teleos, is complete. Complete in more mental and moral character. I believe, okay, if you go through this whole series, I believe the whole point of all of these examples is to bring us to a point where we're living consistently with 1 Corinthians 13, which is the love chapter, and then 1 Corinthians 14:1, the very first part of that verse says, follow after charity, or follow after love. It's not a list of requirements. It's an example of illustrations that show us what it means to live like Christ and what it means to love those around us. That's what kingdom living is all about. And again, it's not just simply being good or doing good. It is all about being good inside, which in turn leads to external actions that are consistent with the kingdom. So here's our little list here, all filled in, okay? So, old righteousness, don't kill anybody. Easy to do. New righteousness, don't have anger or contempt. Not so easy, right? Old righteousness, don't commit adultery. New righteousness, don't cultivate lust. Old righteousness, don't, in this context, give a pink slip, don't divorce for no reason. New righteousness, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Old righteousness, keep vows or oaths. New righteousness, not only should we keep our oath, we shouldn't even try to verbally manipulate. We should be plain speaking. They should know where we stand, what we believe. Do exactly to others what they have done to you. Don't harm, but help. Hate your enemy. Love your enemy. I mean, think about what would have the outcome if Christ had treated us according to the old righteousness, that you were to hate your enemies. What were we before salvation? We were the enemy of God. Yet he loved us and gave himself for us before we were reconciled to him. That's the best example of love in action. So here's a concluding statement I came across for this particular section. It says, from a human standpoint, we tend to return harm for harm. We generally do only what is legally required, the bare minimum, what would be expected, and we give only to those who we care about. From a kingdom standpoint, I am to return good for evil. I am to do more than I strictly must. And I need to give people who ask and are in need. That's the way that we show that we're living in the kingdom. So to conclude, I pulled in a slide from last time. So from kind of the introduction to this section, I think it does a good job of kind of wrapping up what we've been talking about. So again, as we noted, wrong action is not the problem, right? It's a symptom. It's an external symptom of what's inside the person. And again, I had not known ahead of time, we didn't plan this, but the whole point, the fact that we're doing the Sermon on the Mount at the same time we're doing James, I'd say I can't believe it, but I do because it's God, right? To me, I know that God exists because of things that happen like this in my life, that I could never have planned, and he planned it better than I could have ever expected. And so we see this, what's the whole point of the book of James? Is that show me your faith by what? By your works. Show me what's inside you by what ends up being on the outside. Show me your attitude by the actions that result. And we cannot be good simply by trying to be good. We have to change our hearts. We have to follow after Christ. And so it's the inner life of the soul that we must aim to transform. Then our behavior will naturally and easily follow. We can't change the inside by simply doing different things on the outside. But we can change the outside by changing the inside. It's like a thing about a pre-existing condition. You have to change the inside first. Oh, Merry Christmas. Okay, so we're at the end. I know we're a few minutes early. Do you want anything, or you want to sing a song? Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot.
All right, we haven't taken prayer requests for a while, so I think we can do that for a little bit, and if we're out early, that's fine too. So let me get my pencil out, or my pen. And do we have any prayer requests? Let me give you some information then, and you can think about things that we should be praying about. Nick and Morgan Hoffman had their baby on, was that Monday? This feels like about a 3-week, 1 week. You ever have those where the week